tonight at 10:05.
Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Emily Sue.
And I'm Joyce Woo. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
A charred body is found in a structure used as living quarters by refugees in Yuen Long.
Alan Zeman says it'll be a crime and tragedy if Pan-Democrats veto government's political reform bill.
Malaysia declares the loss of flight MH370 as an accident. Police are trying to identify a charred body found inside a two-story structure following a fire in Yuen Long this morning.
About 40 refugees, mostly from Southeast Asia, lived in subdivided units near the building that was burned down. ATV's Winner Wong reports.
Images captured on a mobile phone show the fire engulfing a two-story tin-sheeted structure hut in Inca village on Kam Sheung Road this morning. The fire, which broke out at 10:30 a.m., also spread to two abandoned double-decker buses nearby. After firefighters doused the flames, police found a charred body at the site. I heard two bangs coming from the flats, said the village chief. He added that the structure had been split up into subdivided units. According to neighbors, a Sri Lankan man had been living inside the room where the fire started for the past 5 to 6 years. About 40 refugees lived in the area around the gutted structure.
This one fire start, again me sleeping, again somebody calling, fire outside, again we see, oh too much fire, again scared, again go out. Maybe Sri Lankan, Bengali, Bangladesh, Indonesia and Bangladesh, black people, so many people. Chinese, maybe 4 or 5 Chinese.
3 units in the structure were destroyed by the blaze, which the Fire Services Department is treating as arson. Winner Wong, ATV News.
Police have arrested 6 African men on suspicion of drug trafficking in Wan Chai.
Officers also seized $730,000 in cash and drugs worth $500,000 from the home of one suspect. ATV's An Jiang reports.
Handcuffed and hooded, 6 African men aged between 27 and 44 were taken to a police station on suspicion of drug trafficking. They were arrested in Wan Chai's bar area just after midnight last night. Officers swooped on the suspects following a 3-month investigation. Police stumbled on the alleged syndicate while investigating a double murder in Wan Chai in November. After the suspects were spotted on closed-circuit TV, police began probing their activities. Officers posing as customers seized 20,000 Hong Kong dollars worth of cocaine, cannabis, hashish, ice, and ecstasy from the suspects, some of which were found in an air conditioning vent in a back alley of Lockhart Road. Officers also raided one suspect's flat in Hing Fat building in Yau Ma Tei.
During the house search, police has seized a total of $730,000 of US, which are suspected to be the drug proceeds of this drug trafficking syndicate.
Officers also found 50 grams of cocaine and 20 grams of ice worth about 500,000 Hong Kong dollars. Lee said the suspected syndicate supplied drugs mainly to expatriates. Ann Chang, ATV News.
A 68-year-old cleaner has been given a suspended jail sentence for collecting cash which fell out of a security vehicle in Wan Chai on Christmas Eve. Chung Yong-kip was also ordered to pay $6,000 to G4S, the security company which was carrying the money. The cleaner picked up $8,000 but returned $2,000 earlier. There was a mad scramble for money when $15 million in $500 notes fell out of the vehicle. 7 people have been arrested for pocketing the unexpected windfall.
Prominent businessman Alan Zeman says it'll be a crime and a tragedy if Pan-Democratic lawmakers veto the government's universal suffrage proposal for the next chief executive election.
He said Hong Kong should break the current political stalemate and move forward. Members of the think tank set up by Hong Kong's first chief executive have met for the third time since it was launched in November. Tung Chee-hwa himself evaded reporters' questions, but members of the group known as Our Hong Kong Foundation were ready to share their views on the SAR's political turmoil. Prominent businessman Alan Seaman, pioneer of the Lan Kwai Fong Entertainment District and former head of Ocean Park, urged opposition lawmakers to abandon their decision to veto the government's political reform package. The Pan-Democrats are furious over what they regard as fake universal suffrage, because under Beijing's formula, candidates critical of the central government will in effect be screened out from the 2017 chief executive election.
If we miss the chance, it'll be really a crime for all the people. Everyone, all of you standing here will have a chance to vote. And I think that's really, really key so that we can really get Hong Kong unstuck. At the moment, Hong Kong is stuck and we're not moving forward. We're moving backwards. And for the future generation, it'd be a tragedy if we miss this chance.
The think tank's deputy chief, Simon Lee, said the group's 80 consultants representing various sectors will meet regularly to come up with a list of concrete suggestions before the government tables its final reform package in LegCo this summer.
There are mixed results to an appeal by Civil Human Rights Front regarding a protest it's organizing on Sunday. An appeal board ordered police to rephrase the letter of no objection for the demonstration. Instead of fully assisting police in carrying out their duties, the front only has to help urge the crowd to cooperate with officers. But the board ruled that the front still has to provide at least 100 marshals to maintain order. The organizers have found only 60 so far.
Health officials say they are prepared to deal with any increase in flu cases in the coming month.
There have been 134 cases of severe flu so far this year, and 74 of the patients have died. ATV's Arthur Aquila reports.
Flu cases are expected to surge over the Lunar New Year, but the government says hospitals will be able to handle a sharp increase in the number of patients. Speaking on a radio show this morning, Health Undersecretary Sophia Chan said the hospital authority has a contingency plan. It will delay non-urgent procedures and minor surgeries so that more beds and manpower are available. But Chan urged people, especially those in the vulnerable category, to get flu vaccinations. So far this year, more than half of the 318 people who contracted some form of flu were primary school or kindergarten students, or those attending childcare centers. But Chan insists there isn't any need to suspend classes because the dominant strain of flu this year had affected the elderly more than the young. Arthur Aquila, ATV News.
Overseas, Malaysia has officially declared the disappearance of flight MH370 as an accident. The move enables Malaysia Airlines, which operated the plane, to compensate the victims' relatives. The aircraft, with 239 people on board, disappeared in March last year during a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Months of searches failed to turn up any trace of the Boeing 777.
Indonesian investigators say they now have a pretty clear picture of the last moments of the AirAsia plane, which crashed into the sea late last month, killing all 162 people on board.
They said the co-pilot was at the controls moments before the crash. Investigators have disclosed fresh information 1 month after AirAsia flight QZ8501 crashed 40 minutes after taking off from the Indonesian city of Surabaya for Singapore. All 162 people on board were killed, but only 70 bodies have been recovered from the Java Sea. The head investigator said today that the French co-pilot was flying the plane shortly before the tragedy. According to the experts, the flight data recorders provided a pretty clear picture of the plane's last moments. The Airbus A320 had been cruising at a stable altitude before the crash, the investigators said, contradicting earlier claims that the aircraft had climbed abruptly from its cruising height and stalled before plunging into the sea. The probe is now focusing on possible computer glitches. An inquest into last month's hostage siege in Australia has heard that one of the captives was killed by fragments of a police bullet.
But first, in a world wrap, Havana is demanding the return of some Cuban territory before resuming diplomatic ties with the U.S. Here's Arthur Aquila.
Cuban President Raul Castro says the U.S. must hand back Guantanamo Bay before the two sides can restore ties that were cut more than 50 years ago. Washington uses Guantanamo Bay to house terrorist suspects. Castro also demanded the lifting of a trade embargo imposed by the U.S. in an unsuccessful attempt to force Cuba to abandon socialism. An inquest into last month's hostage drama at a cafe in Sydney has heard that one person was killed by a police bullet. The 17-hour siege ended when police fired several shots, killing the hostage taker. 2 hostages were also killed. The coroner said one of them, 38-year-old Katrina Dawson, was hit by fragments from a police bullet which ricocheted.
One fragment struck a major blood vessel. She lost consciousness quickly and died shortly afterwards.
The other hostage, the cafe's manager, was shot in the head at close range by the gunman, witnesses said. A worker in Taiwan was killed and 2 others were injured after scaffolding collapsed on the set of a film directed by Hollywood legend Martin Scorsese. The 3 were dismantling a Japanese-style building in Taipei when the accident occurred this morning. Filming for the historical drama Silence has been halted following the tragedy. Arthur Urquiola, ATV News.
8 black men in the U.S. have finally found justice 54 years after they were convicted for sitting in a restaurant reserved for whites.
The civil rights activists from South Carolina received an apology from officials.
54 years after they were convicted, 7 black men returned to court in Rock Hill, South Carolina. They were among the so-called Friendship 9, civil rights activists who were arrested, convicted and jailed for daring to sit in a whites-only restaurant in January 1961. This time they were in court to hear that they have finally been cleared.
The Friendship 9 were not even prosecuted for the occupancy of the stools, per se. They were prosecuted solely based on their race. We cannot rewrite history, but we can write history.
One of the Friendship 9 explained why they decided to act all those years ago.
Tired of being treated like second-class citizens. Tired of being spat on, kicked, called the N-word, drinking out of colored water fountain. We got tired of that.
It was an emotional day for the activists, who after serving 30 days in jail, continued to be harassed by police in their state. But this time in court, they received an apology amid calls that they be hailed as heroes.
Time now for sports with Raymond Yang.
So a showdown between 2 household names in tennis, Raymond.
Well, that's right. It's a match tennis fans don't want to miss. Serena Williams will bid for her 6th Australian Open crown when she takes on another veteran, Maria Sharapova, in the final.
Using her trademark powerful serves, Serena Williams threw fellow American Madison Keys off her rhythm early in the semi-final in Melbourne. Serena was avenging